Hello, welcome back to Zekism. Kevin Feige, the Lord God Almighty, wink. Kevin Feige has been speaking to various outlets in the last, 48 hours in a sort of unprecedented round table, they're describing it as. And he sort of revealed some things, told some things, so all of it is newsworthy. I've sort of tried to make copious notes as to what he said to sort of not miss anything. But essentially, I mean, this headline sort of wraps it, sort of does it in a nutshell. But yeah, he was there for a long time, speaking to various outlets. And yeah, I mean, in the wake of Fantastic Four, we are here at Phase 6 is here. And yeah, I mean, Fantastic Four hits on Friday worldwide, tracking to be about 110 domestic. Who knows what internationally it's going to do? We just had Superman in the last 2 weeks, so they're I think there's a lot of pressure on the film to succeed. The Marvel fatigue, or he addresses it here, but we'll get into the article. Kevin Feige was teasing a small group of journalists, including from Variety. I've done Variety, by the way. In most storied conference rooms in Hollywood, in the heart of Marvel Studios offices on the Disney lot in Burbank. He was there to talk about the past, the present, future of the studio he's led since Rob Downey Jr. declared himself to be Iron Man in 2008, after Marvel's communication chief Angela Shaw, blah blah blah. So that's just a sort of anecdotal. He said there are plans for the next 7 years of the MCU. It's traditionally a 5-year plan, he said. I think it goes to 2032 right now. He's always very vague. He's very good with the press, I think, Kevin Feige. He's always very sort of like, gives them a little crumb or a little nugget of information, but all of that sort of in code anyway. There hasn't quite been 7 years since he last did this. It's still rare that Feige gives an interview of this length or candor. But after some ice-breaking small talk in which Marvel's chief creative officer shared his thoughts on DC Studios' Superman, more on that in a bit, Feige made clear why he's spending the Friday before the premiere of Fantastic Four First Steps, the 37th film and 54th title overall in the MCU, speaking on the record. We produced 50 hours of stories between 2007 and 2019, but in the 6 years since Endgame concluded the Infinity Saga, we've had well over 100 hours of stories in half that time, which is too much. We'll pause for a minute. He's right. It is an excessive amount to keep track of and maintain quality over. So for every sort of criticism, valid criticism that Marvel Studios and the MCU has gotten over the last 5 years, it is an insane amount of content. The TV shows alone, with shooting schedules and script supervisors and the time it takes, because I know some people who work on some of the productions for them that have been filmed in the UK. It is an insane amount of time it takes. I mean, we're talking like a 9-month shooting schedule, I think, in some capacities. It's a long time. And if you think you're juggling, their first batch of shows, there's a lot of time and coordination. And whilst that's going on, you're then planning the next year's and then the next year's and then the next year's. It's a lot to keep track of. And again, I'm not just trying to be a sort of Marvel defender. I will validly go into why the quality has dipped. And that's one reason as to why the quality has dipped over the last 4 or 5 years. I don't think it's as detrimental as some people say. I don't think, just search Marvel into YouTube. You'll see loads of hate videos about how they're dead and buried, they're awful now, they've never coming back, Marvel's done, etc, etc, etc. I'm not that dramatic. I don't think that's true. I think what they need to do now, which what I think they're doing, is focusing on the quality, minimizing the efforts that they're releasing, and sort of focusing on like I said, the quality of the storytelling, which is what brought people in originally. They're talking about superhero fatigue, which he'll go into in a minute, and he references Superman as evidence of that. I think that people weren't invested in the MCU in Phase 1 and probably the early parts of Phase 2. Maybe select characters, but the big, wider, grandiose event that was Infinity War Endgame was built up over mainly Phase 2, but predominantly Phase 3. And you can point to, especially Phase 3, pretty much every single film they released, and it was only films, remember, back then as well. Every film they released was of a quality that was very well regarded, audience pleasing, and had quality storytelling throughout. I'll also throw in the digital effects and CGI that were in those films were a lot better than what we've received in phases 4 and 5 in some areas, in some projects. So I think all of these things, combined with the fact that they've introduced some sort of, more ham-fisted social agenda sort of areas, and again, I'm not going to judge too harshly, but there has been some ham-fisted attempts at addressing some more modern social agenda things, and like you said, is it necessary? Isn't it necessary? Personally, I don't think it's in every capacity it's been necessary. I also don't think every single character fits that mold and that category that gets slated online either. I think you can point to a couple, and I think you can point to a few, but to say carte blanche, we shouldn't have a character who represents this demographic, we shouldn't have it, that's just ridiculous and silly. I think if those characters are introduced and the storytelling is on point, then you ignore those kind of things, and they're incorporated and embraced by a mainstream audience more so than if they're not. And I think, anyway, that's just one of many of the issues that I've sort of dovetailed into. We'll go back to the article. Sorry, that was a little mini rant. After Endgame, Feige said in the company entered into a period of experimentation and evolution of the kinds of movies. And by the way, I'll finish the quote. After Endgame, Feige said that the company entered into a period of experimentation. Go away, Kristen Stewart. After Endgame, Feige said the company entered into a period of experimentation and evolution of the kinds of movies it was making, leading to projects like Eternals, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and I think that was that experimental, that one. I've always thought if you take success and don't experiment with it and don't risk with it, then it's not worth it, he said. What we also ended up focusing on because of Disney Plus was expansion, and it's that expansion that I think led people to say it used to be fun, but now do I have to know everything about all of these? Now, pause for thought, because when he says they entered a period of experimentation and evolution, I remember in 2017, 18, 19, whenever it was, when they were at the peak of their powers and everyone sort of went like lemmings to the cinemas to see any Marvel movie because they could guarantee the quality of the storytelling. There were articles, probably by people like Variety, that said Marvel needs to experiment. They need to reinvent the formula. They need to stop releasing the same film over and over again. All that sort of. And now I disagreed with that comment at the time as well. But what they did, I remember plenty of fans on Twitter who are now slagging off Marvel for taking risks were the ones tweeting, let's mix it up. Let's do a project with ... Insert random spin on the superhero genre. Oh, here, why don't you do it? And they've taken those swings. Some of them are landed, some of them haven't, and they've got criticised for it by the same people who were asking for those changes. So I think there's an element of they can't please all masters. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Taking swings is what they did with Guardians, for example. That was a swing that paid off big time because those characters are beloved. They had a brilliant filmmaker in James Gunn to do it at the time. I think that he had a hand in the script, but I don't think the script of the first one was written by him. I could be wrong in that. I think he co-wrote that with someone. But at the same time, it was a swing that landed. To a certain extent, other projects that they've done were swings, and that they either landed or they didn't. But they were hitting more than they weren't in phases 3, especially for 2 and 3, as they were building towards, Thor Ragnarok. Thor Ragnarok was a massive swing with Taika Waititi, and that worked. Thor Love and Thunder, swing and a miss. But so you can see the dichotomy and the irony of what they were asked whereas what they delivered, and that the quality wasn't there. It is what it is. And so I think I take umbrage, I think, with a lot of people who, like I said, have criticised Marvel for what they are now in 2025 and what they've done in the last 4 or 5 years in phases 4 and 5. It's been unfocused. My as a super fan is Lord, Feige's my lord and all that. And that's a shout out to my brother, by the way. He thinks I just praise everything Marvel relentlessly. That's not true, but whatever. Hi, brother. The issue is that they were building very focused towards something with phases 2 and 3. In phases 4 and 5, and I'm going to say 6, but say phases 4 and 5 in particular, it's very scattergun. Whereas in phases 2 and 3, you had a film come out every 3 months, say 3 or 4 months, that was building towards one key end game, pun intended. In phases 4 and 5, you've had so many different strands and subplots and like I said, new characters introduced and all this sort of stuff. So every project had a different thing going on, and it didn't have that through line that 2 and 3 had, which was we're building, by the way, towards Thanos. If they may have said they're building towards Kang, but Kang was never shown. When he lost to ants. It was a big, messy, sort of weird phase 4 and 5. Like I said, experimental. Very experimental, and I think they're in a place where yes, they may have lost some of the support of the mainstream audiences in terms of when you go to when a new Marvel film comes out, people aren't just going to walk into the cinema and see it relentlessly. I think that's across the board, to be honest, with cinemas in general. But nevertheless, I think what they need to do now is have a track record of quality again. Have an end goal in mind, which they have. They've announced Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom, which again he'll go into in a second. But they have an end game in mind with Doomsday and Secret Wars. You've now got a hit quality. Thunderbolts was a really good film. Daredevil Born Again, I think, was a really good show. Despite some of the flaws of it due to the production redos or something, but seemingly some of the episodes that were made before they rejigged it with the two new directors. It was seemingly those episodes were pretty good, and I think it ended really well. Daredevil Born Again was a success. Ironheart for me wasn't a success, and Captain America 4 wasn't a success, but they were built in a previous 3 years ago. I think they were greenlit, so we are in a little bit of a getting all the backlog out as much as it is releasing the quality work that they've been doing over the last 1 or 2 years since they decided to have a creative rethink. Deadpool and Wolverine came out last year. I know it's a year ago, but still, that came out last year. That was really well received. Loki season 2 the year before, that was really well received. So it's not true to say they've just been releasing trash over the last 4 or 5 years. That's not true whatsoever. But it has been, really good project, sort of meh project. Really good project, meh project. And so hopefully they can begin Phase 6 on a high with Fantastic Four. I haven't seen it yet. I've got my ticket for Thursday. And we'll be off to the races, as they say. Okay, here we go. Back to the article. Consequently, Feige believes the well-documented problems that Marvel's been facing over the last few years stem from an overabundance of supply, not a sudden drop in demand. Look at Superman, he said of the hit film, which opened to 125 million domestically and has grossed 407 million globally. To date, it's clearly not superhero fatigue, right? Now, the story of Superman's box office is not written just yet. I mean, it's taken a lot. 400 million in 2 weeks is pretty good. But Fantastic Four is just about to chip away at that. So I think we haven't seen the end of Superman's box office to date. And even me, as the biggest shill in the world, will say there is an element of superhero fatigue in cinema goers. But I think there's an element of cinema fatigue as well. Whether it's due to pricing, whether it's due to better options on TV at home, whether it's to do with the experience of the cinema not being up to scratch, whether it's to do with travel costs, who knows? It's I know some places in America they have to travel about 5 hours to their nearest cinema, so it is one of those things where it can be really spotty in terms of the resulting supply and demand, or whether it's worth their effort going to the cinema. And if they are, they're not just going to go to the cinema every week, they're going to select which films to go to. So that's just something to pocket with what you just said about Superman, which, by the way, I think it will do well at the end of its run, but maybe not be regarded. I mean, Variety is, by the way, an outlet that is Hollywood's friend, so it's not going to be negative about even the worst film released. Insert joke about the Marvels here. I liked it a lot, Feige added of the DC film. I love you just jump right into it. You don't know who Mr. Terrific is, right? Tough, you figure it out. This is a fully fleshed out world. I mean, he's good friends with James Gunn, clearly, at the end, and I agree with him about Mr. Terrific. I didn't know a thing about him when I saw that film, and you end up really liking his character by the end of it. As Feige explained, and as Disney CEO Bob Iger, has also said more than once, Marvel's dramatic increase in volume spread Marvel far too thin for its relatively small team of executives to keep up. Like I said, I'm not going to go over old ground I just went into about 10 minutes ago during my mini rant, but that's one reason as to why the dramatic increase in volume reduced the quality of Marvel. There is going to be some truth to that, definitely, especially if Feige's the overall sign-off and he's been spread really thin. You know, come on, it's not the only reason, but it is a valid excuse to bring up. So here you go, there's my middle ground argument. For the first time ever, quantity trumped quality, Feige said. We spent 12 years working on the Infinity Saga, saying that's never gonna happen to us. We always had more characters than we could possibly make because we weren't going to make a movie a month. Suddenly there's a mandate to make more and we go, well, we have to do more. Starting in 2023, audiences began to sour on Marvel's content on the big and small screen. As Variety reported in June, only 3 of the 22 films in the Infinity Saga grossed less than $500 million worldwide. Since the pandemic, however, 7 of the 13 movies in the MCU have failed to reach that milestone for the reasons I just said. Viewership for Marvel streaming shows, meanwhile, have also steadily declined, according to data from Luminate. Most recently, Thunderbolts, which was brilliant, by the way, which earned some of the best reviews Marvel's received in years, only grossed $380 million globally. Thunderbolts, I thought, was a very, very good movie, he's right, but nobody knew that title, and many of those characters were from a TV show. Some audiences were still feeling that notion of, I guess I had to see the other shows to understand who this is. If you actually saw the movie, that wouldn't be the case, and we make the movie, so that's not the case. But I think we still have to make sure the audience understands that. Now, he's not wrong. I think there is an assumption that, well, here's where I'll play devil's advocate here, because he's not wrong in pointing out that, yes, there is an element of, especially with Thunderbolts, there was 1 or 2 characters of the cast where you wouldn't know who they were if you didn't watch 1 or 2 of the TV shows that they were from. That said, that's no different to having to see every film that Marvel's released previously to get what they were going on in Phase 3. So it is a bit of like, well, you know, it worked back then, there's no reason why it wouldn't work now. It's just maybe you come back to that quantity argument where there's maybe just too much to spend time with. A 2-hour movie or a 6-hour TV show, you know, give or take, it's a lot to ask of an audience to keep up. But that said, I hope they don't drop that element. I don't want them to. I like the interconnected universe element of Marvel. I think it's its selling point, to be honest with you. So I would hate for that to be lost as a result of, you know, a few people on Twitter going, I wish they didn't connect so much. I've got too much precious time. No, you know, you either keep up or you don't. There is an element as well that when you start a project, you don't have to then, you know, you're off to the races from the off. You can spend a bit of time endearing audiences, casual mainstream audiences to, you know, when Thanos was introduced pretty much in Infinity War alone, there was no problems there. We got who he was, we knew who he was, we knew his motivation, and that was established in the film Infinity War. Yes, he popped up for a cameo or 2 in Guardians and in the end of Avengers Age of Ultron, but that was it. There was no other mention of Thanos before that, so there was no hint that we needed character development before that. So again, I would hope they didn't lose that interconnectedness. It's just about the quality of storytelling. Again, the quality is diminished, not the audience's love for seeing quality stories. That's the important point I think I'm trying to make in a roundabout way. To that end, Feige spent an hour discussing everything from budgets, TV schedules, and when Marvel greenlights a project to when or if audiences could see Miles Morales, Ms. Marvel, or Charlize Theron again. He also provided an update on the status of Blade with Mahershala Ali and confirmed widespread fan speculation that 2027's Avengers Secret Wars will not only conclude the multiverse saga, but provide a reset for the entire MCU, including a new cast for the X-Men films. None of that's particularly new, but it is interesting to see him talk about it because he doesn't give a lot of interviews. So it's interesting to see it come from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Sorry, Feige, I didn't mean to call you a horse. Still love you. Whilst Marvel's feature output is slowing down to at least 3 films a year, a pace that Marvel first reached in 2017, its TV output is cooling off even further, with even just a single live-action show per year. Nothing wrong with that. In fact, I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And the shows that they do may have far less overlap with the feature films to disabuse audiences from the expectation they have to watch everything to follow what's happening in any MCU project. By way of example, Feige cited the Marvel TV shows of the 2010s like Daredevil and Jessica Jones on Netflix, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter on ABC, which were produced by a separate, now defunct division of Marvel Entertainment, so they had a tenuous connection to the MCU, if at all. Now, I don't think that's actually not necessarily a bad move, because they are MCU adjacent. You know, they were back then, certainly. But, I mean, go watch something like Loki. It's so good. Loki, or WandaVision are my two that I hold up with great aplomb. They're really well told and well made shows. Now, did you need WandaVision to connect to Multiverse of Madness? You didn't have to do that. That's what they were planning back then, because they thought that might work. But I would hope that the quality of storytelling told in those shows does not diminish because suddenly Marvel's got a bee in their bonnet about TV shows and they're less important to them than the movies. Because I think you can have your cake and eat it. You just have to make sure the quality's of a standard. And I think it was with Loki, it was with WandaVision, and it was with some of the films in phases 4 and 5 as well. You can do it. It just maybe this is where his argument about spreading yourself too thin comes. I think allowing a TV show to be a TV show is what we're returning to. Sorry. Asked if the events at the end of Thunderbolts, when most of the population of Manhattan was enveloped in an inky black shroud of depressive nothingness, would affect season 2 of Disney series Born Again. Feige had a simple answer: no. There you go. so there you go. There's the answer there. So, see, I'll be honest, I can shrug that one off. That doesn't bother me that much, but I know some people will be bothered by that because they're like, we just saw. Well, apparently not many people watch Born Again anyway. So, but it's a minor gripe. At the same time, the line between film and TV is not ironclad. Jon Bernthal will play his Daredevil Born Again character, the Punisher, in both an upcoming TV special, which sounds dope, and it's opposite Tom Holland in 2026's Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is fascinating that he's involved in that for loads of reasons. I haven't got into it in a video or anything, but it is fascinating that Jon Bernthal is joining, I want to say PG, but a more child-friendly Spider-Man film, when we were assured by him, he said he didn't want to do a Punisher if it was going to be kid-friendly. So, assuming that there is going to be a kid-friendly version, because it's going to be a 12, because it's Sony, it's going to be a 12. It's interesting that he's gonna be in the Spider-Man for a multitude of reasons. But I wonder if he was on set of the Odyssey and Tom Holland managed to sell him on it. I don't know. It's really weird. I wonder if fly on the wall. Where we have great actors playing great characters, I think it would be fun to see them multiple places. I agree. But the output will be much less. That reduction also meant that 2 of Marvel's TV projects were held for over a year after they'd been completed. Ironheart with Dominic Thorne, which concluded in early July, and Wonder Man with Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, which premieres in December. It's something Feige is not keen to repeat. I don't like when things sit on shelves, he said. It stinks. The delay especially affected Wonder Man, which follows an aspiring actor with hidden superpowers as he strives to land a role on a TV series playing a superhero. Feige, who was wearing a Wonder Man baseball cap, pointed out that Marvel made the show before HBO Max's 2024 comic book movie Send Up the Franchise, or Apple TV's 25 outside the studio, but now it looks like they're following a trend instead of leading it. Okay. So, I didn't know Wonder Man had been sitting on the shelf for that long. That's interesting. Okay. Well, look, they sat on Ironheart for a while. It did feel very of Phase 4, that show, when I was watching it. It like the boat sailed on that, so to speak. Since the massive success of 2018's Black Panther, Marvel has made a concerted effort to produce projects centered around women, people of color, LGBTQ characters. Those titles include Captain Marvel, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Eternals, The Marvels, and Captain America Brave New World in film, and WandaVision, Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk, Eternal Law, Secret Invasion, Echo, and Agatha all along on TV. Several of these projects have been successful, but many have not, commercially or critically. More to the point, with Marvel's decision to dramatically reduce its output, it's been unclear what kind of future many of these characters have in the MCU, if any at all. Now, this is what I got into earlier. There's no easy way of going into this. Again, you can have your cake and eat it. You can have diversity included in projects, and clearly they, I didn't know it was that many. I couldn't have listed that many, to be honest. But clearly they have been on a representation drive over the last 2 phases, 4 and 5. To again, variants. I could go through them individually and say critically or commercially, did they do well? Captain Marvel did well commercially. Critically, it was panned. Black Widow didn't do well commercially because of the pandemic, to be fair. And I thought, I enjoyed Black Widow quite a bit. Shang-Chi, I really liked Shang-Chi. I think it did well critically. Again, pandemic ridden, but I don't think it did terribly. Eternals did terribly critically, did terribly commercially. The Marvels did terribly critically, did terribly commercially. Captain America Brave New World did terribly critically and did terribly commercially as well. And then WandaVision was great, Ms. Marvel was okay, and She-Hulk was not very good. Secret Invasion was dire. Echo was okay. Agatha All Along I thought was brilliant. I thought it was genuinely brilliant. Now the difference is the ones that I've pointed out that were really good they were really good shows. They were really well made, they're really well written, really well structured, really well thought out. So the diversity and equality argument was not the driving force for why those shows existed. That's, I think, the difference. You can have a show that is representative, like Agatha All Along, perfectly. Agatha All Along was a show that Agatha Harkness was a character in the comics I'm familiar with. I didn't give a monkeys about seeing a show about her. Then you hear all the stuff about the only reason they're making it, and again, these are online speculations. The only reason they're making it was because it's a representative thing, and you sort of, roll your eyes a bit, and you go, well, can't we just make a show that's really good, that has these things? And I remember the promotion for this show was awful. The trailers were terrible. The press coverage was terrible for it. Honestly, it did it disservice, because when you watch the show was really good, really, really good. I really love Agatha All Along, and it doesn't. I was watching it. It didn't bother me one bit that it might have been have the diversity and representation in it, because the show was good. You couldn't watch that show and say it was awful or it was a terrible show or it only exists because of diversity. Ridiculous. Anyone who watched the show will know that is a really, really well made show, and I'll defend that to the hilt. And that's the difference. You can have your cake and eat it when you want to do it. Pressed on this question, Feige appeared unconcerned. Marvel represents the world outside your window, he said. I've always said it, before DEI and woke became a thing, and after DEI and woke became a thing, are we after? I don't think so. He singled out Ms. Marvel and the Marvel star Iman Vellani as one of the greatest bits of casting we've ever done, adding, I can't wait to see her somewhere. Iman Vellani genuinely is brilliant. She's awesome. And I think her portrayal of Ms. Marvel is bob on perfect. The show I thought was okay. It started really well and really creative, and it reminded me of Spider-Man Homecoming. And I thought, this is really cool. This is really quite, and it's almost like someone else took over halfway through the show and made it. I mean, the villains weren't great anyway. The show just sort of went down off a cliff. Anyway, long story short, we'll go with that. Where that will be is much less evident. At the end of the Marvels, Vellani's Kamala Khan appeared to recruit Hailee Steinfeld's Kate Bishop to be part of a young superhero team. But Feige danced around the question about whether Young Avengers, as a film, TV series, or TV special, was on the horizon. I'll be totally honest. I don't vibe with the. I'm a nearly 40-year-old man. I'm not a big Young Avengers guy. But if there is an audience out there, I don't think there is, though. That's the problem. I don't think there is an audience for Young Avengers. Now, the argument will be, yes, but they've got to create an audience for Young Avengers, which is, a fair point. But I think in the era where Disney especially is not interested in any gambling of any sort of the projects, hence their release schedule is all sequels, we're not going to see a gamble come out potentially from a Disney project, or a Marvel for a good long time. I think maybe they'll start going in phase 7, maybe start sort of dipping their toe a little bit into, well, there's this character in the comics, I can't think of an example, but we may experiment here. And anyway, long story short, potentially, he said, in that case it comes down to where's the best story and where is the best strange alchemy. That's an odd turn of phrase. Who would be fun to see them with? Each other, because that's what the Young Avengers are, but it's also mixing it up more. Feige was also more definitive about the potential of another highly anticipated Marvel character, Spider-Man's Miles Morales, showing up in the MCU in the near future. That is nowhere, he said, until Sony Pictures, which holds the rights, completes its animated Miles trilogy with Beyond the Spider-Verse. We've been told to stay away. Okay, that's interesting. That's really interesting, actually. Makes sense. I don't know why that film's been delayed so much. That's interesting. What a weird. I'm not sure if I believe him, either. Maybe that's BS. Maybe it's not. But I think we'll see a Miles Morales in Secret Wars. That's my predict. The Marvel method is here to stay. It just won't be quite as expensive. DC Studios chief James Gunn has repeatedly said he will only greenlight projects that have a complete script. What a great policy. Imagine that world. That is a pointed difference from Marvel, which has sometimes announced projects with release dates before a writer's been hired, let alone before a script is completed, and famously reworks movies throughout the filmmaking process. Fantastic Four star Eben Moss-Backrack recently told Variety he did not think the script was fully ready when the cast began 3 weeks of rehearsal before filming, so he sort of workshopped the movie in a way. Now, yes, that's incredibly... I mean, James Gunn... I'm with James Gunn on this. I don't know how... I mean, I'm not a filmmaker, obviously, but... It doesn't. If I'm planning a creative endeavor, I have to structure it. So when I do a video, for example, on YouTube, I do write notes about what I'm doing. I don't just switch on record and blah. I do have a sort of a thought process that goes into it, and that's a really minor thing compared to a big multi-million-dollar film production. It is weird that Marvel seemingly can have half a script, and maybe that's generous. Or, like you said, greenlight a project because they need whatever. They need to produce content for Disney Plus, for example. So they'll greenlight something like, I don't know, the Hawkeye show, which there isn't really a point to other than bringing Kate Bishop into the MCU. I enjoyed Hawkeye. I thought it was fine. But that comes to my mind as something that, or Echo, maybe a show. Echo, why did that get greenlit? Nothing wrong with it. It was just like, why is this on TV? Why was this greenlit? It doesn't bring anything forward. It doesn't serve anything. Echo didn't even show up in Born Again. Daredevil Born Again. I don't know why they did that. Anyway, so that's an example of a project that's greenlit that doesn't particularly have a purpose to be there other than just to be there. And like I said, when the script, there's no script. Marvel's famous for doing this as well. They'll start a project with somewhat of a script, and they'll sort of figure it out. And I think those days are done. I think phases 4 and 5, where there was, like I said, I think Ant-Man Quantumania comes to mind because I know that one didn't have a completed script. I think there'll be copious others that I can't think of right now. The fact that Fantastic Four didn't have a completed script is interesting. That's a little pause for thought and maybe a concern. But Marvel's famous for doing this. I know people who've worked on Marvel projects from as way back as 2010. I genuinely do. Who have said, like, well, they think they know what they're doing, or they've had a mood board sort of thing with stuff on it that they wanted to put in the film that have been nixed and moved to a future project. So this sort of restructuring and retooling during a film's production is something they've been doing for the last 15, 20 years. 20 years? Hang on a second. They started in 2008. So yeah, it's something they do quite regularly. So it's hard for me to criticize something that they were doing successfully in 2018, for example. I know Infinity War was actually a patchwork of, yes, there was a script, mostly done, about 75% to 80%, but there were ideas from Age of Ultron and ideas that were moved to Infinity War because they wanted it there instead, or it made more narrative sense there, or so stuff like that, or stuff that was moved from this project to this project. It goes on all the time. So I think it's yes, it's not ideal, and it is damning with faint praise a little bit, but if it's worked before, it's really not something for people to get uppity about now, because it's something they've done successfully in the past as well. And if you're and the other thing is, if you've got something in the script, not every film sticks to a script religiously. There will be, we've tried it on camera and it really doesn't work, so we're going to retool it slightly, and we're going to, it happens all the time as well. So anyway, this is a big ranty episode, but this is the passion I have for the Marvel brand, clearly, hopefully, coming forward. Feige took issue with both the comparison between Gunn's mandate at DC and Marvel's approach, and the idea that Marvel needed to radically alter how it makes projects. We've never started a movie without a full script, and I've never been satisfied with the script that we've had. Oh, what? Wait, what? We've never started a movie without a full script. Check. And I have never been satisfied with the script that we've had. I have never been satisfied. I've never been satisfied with the movie we've released. Okay. So he's an eternal nitpicker. You gotta love the guy. He defended Marvel's practice of plussing projects at every turn as they're being made, a term of art referring to pushing for incremental improvements that Feige credited to Walt Disney. Ooh. Actors, both the ones that are playing these characters for the first or second time, and the characters that are playing for the 10th or 12th time, are the best in the world at it and know these characters so well, Feige said. If they have an idea and you want to listen to it, if they have an idea, you want to listen to it, and you want to adjust to it, and you want to improve it. I wouldn't want to change that. See, it's interesting. Actually, that's a good point, because it's interesting because actors in general like the ability to improvise or have creative input. So when they have a completed script and they have had no input at all, you know damn well if Marvel was adhering to a completed script and no retooling whatsoever was happening, these same people, as in actors, would be bemoaning Marvel, saying, "Oh, it's really boring being on a Marvel film," and blah blah blah. I don't have any creative input. So again, they're damned if they do, and they're damned if they don't. Feige continued, "I know there are filmmakers, James in my experience isn't one of them, maybe he is now, who say, if you want to be a part of my movie, you just say the words and you stay here the entire schedule in case we need you. We have so many actors, we can't do that. We don't do that. We give people a window. We keep to that window." Okay, is that being shade James Gunn's way? I don't think so. Maybe he is like that now. Well, I think it's different for James now because James Gunn is in a position of a studio head. So I think that's just that. Maybe I'm not going to read that as a slight at James. I think he said, "Look, James Gunn worked in our system and he worked quite well in it. He's got his own ways of working now as a studio head, and maybe he does, have a completed script. But he's, as Kevin's saying, we have completed scripts as well. We just, we were a bit loosey goosey when it comes to the making of the films, more so perhaps than DC. But damn well James Gunn's going to mix it up eventually. He can't, there'll come circumstances during the film's production where they'll need to mix it up and change on the fly. But anyway, Marvel has changed course on at least one major aspect of its films: their cost. After budgets began to balloon, and they really have ballooned, it's ridiculous. Following Endgame, partly due to the pandemic, partly due to the need to deliver a certain level of spectacle, the studio started grinding down the budget in 2023. Feige said Marvel's films from Deadpool and Wolverine through the Fantastic Four have been upwards of a third cheaper than they were 2 years before that. Oh, you want to know why? Because they've been filmed in the UK, and the UK gives them a tax break. So there you go, there's the mystery solved on that one. Feige said the Marvel executives even met with the teams behind the 2023 sci-fi epic The Creator, which, again, brilliant, which director Gareth Edwards made for a staggeringly low $80 million to learn how they pulled it off. I'll go out on a limb, and this is going to go out on a limb, I don't know for sure. Gareth Edwards was a CGI artist by trade, who then shifted into directing, or he had a passion for directing, so moved into that. So he can do it, he can film it in a very helpful way when it comes to the digital effects side. He knows what he's doing when it comes to that side of things. Gareth Edwards also is a very good, I would imagine, manager of a project manager, essentially. And so he can keep costs low. Similar in a way to Christopher Nolan. We're talking about CGI artists here. Christopher Nolan isn't a big fan of it. But people who can maintain a budget of a certain degree, they used to in the old days, not have a limitless budget, which is what Disney productions in general started to go towards. They weren't the only ones. Studio, in the need for content, and I think in the need for, when it started, but budgets the solution for studios was to throw money at the problem. The bigger the budget of a film, the better the quality. I don't know who convinced them of that years and years ago, but I think there is a number of people in Hollywood who have made a killing out of the studios over the last 10 years, and I think now that the costs are being reined in, there's a lot of upset people and disenfranchised people coming out of the back of it. I think everybody's in that state of mind, at least at Disney, Feige said, of this belt tightening. I think it's got to be better. Is AI going to do that? I don't know. I hope not. I don't think you need AI for that. You just need good people who know what they're doing. Don't look for the Avengers to set up shop in LA anytime soon. The super team's next two adventures, Doomsday and Secret Wars, are being produced in London's Pinewood Studios. Whoop, whoop. The latest in a long line of big budget Hollywood films to decamp for the UK because it's cheaper and they get tax break. The move has left many in the industry raising the alarm about runaway production, a message that President Trump briefly embraced when he floated the idea of imposing tariffs on foreign-made blockbusters. Feige said that the decision to make the movies overseas as opposed to in Georgia, where many previous Marvel films they've got their studio based have been shot, came down to space, not just the UK's generous subsidies. There was a time, which is not right now, but there was a time where we made that deal 5 or 6 years ago where everybody was fighting for storage space in the great expansion of not just us but everybody, Feige said, referencing the explosion in production that accompanied the streaming revolution. So we have the opportunity to lock up Pinewood, which is why many of our movies will be there for the foreseeable future. He predicted... Oh, that's BS. I call BS on that. Sorry. He predicted that future Marvel films will be shot in the US, particularly in production hubs like Georgia and New York, that offer more competitive film incentives than California, which recently passed a new $750 million production tax credit. My career of making these big movies, very few of them post the Phase 1 movies, have been here, and they moved because of cost. Feige said, there is one exception, however. Wonder Man, which takes place in Hollywood, was filmed in the entertainment capital. I don't really have too many takes on the production. Like I said, I know the subsidies and the tax breaks he's referring to. That certainly Disney's keen to. I mean, Disney filmed so much of their stuff here. The Snow White remake that came out recently, that by all means wasn't a big smash hit at the box office, but they would have got a lot of their money back. Not a lot, but a good proportion of their budget that they spent here, they get back if they release it cinematically. So if, for example, if Marvel had filmed Black Widow in the UK, which I think they did actually, that's a bad example. They did film some of it in the UK. I swear they did. Anyway, long story short, if they filmed for example, oh god, I'm trying to think. If they filmed they did film the Marvels in the UK. So again, these big bombs. Okay, this is a good example. The movies they perhaps perceived as made money on, such as the Marvels, they would have got a vast majority of their budget back, or a percentage of their budget back from the UK government as a result of an incentive of them sort of propping up our film industry over here. You come film Doomsday over here, you get a percentage of the the budget back in a tax credits. So that's the incentive for them to come here. So that's what he's talking about. In March 2023, a month after Jonathan Majors played the arch-villain Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, the actor was arrested for assault and harassment of his then-girlfriend, blah blah blah. Kang had been touted as the Thanos of the multiverse saga and was set to headline his own film in the Avengers Kang Dynasty, which would set up Secret Wars. But the day Majors was convicted on 2 misdemeanor accounts of harassment and assault, Marvel announced it was parting ways with the actor. The following July, the studio revealed Robert Downey Jr. was returning to the MCU to play the even archer arch-villain Doctor Doom in what had been rechristened Avengers Doomsday. On Friday, Feige revealed the studio had grown wary of Kang's heft as a character before Quantumania theaters. I think we're okay. I love Kevin Feige. Sound your BS alert. We had started to realise that Kang just wasn't big enough. Well, he wasn't Thanos, and that there was only one character that could be that, because he was that in the comics for decades and decades. We started talking about Doctor Doom even before we officially pivoted from Kang. In fact, I had started talking with Robert about this audacious idea before Ant-Man 3 even came out. I think Robert Downey Jr. has actually confirmed that in an interview on a podcast, or around about that time, about the idea. So it was late 22, so that would have been before Ant-Man 3 came out. I swear he said that on a podcast. While Kang's future, or lack of one, in the MCU is obvious, Feige was far more circumspect about whether audiences can expect to see other A-list MCU cameos, like Charlize Theron's Clea, Brett Goldstein's Hercules, A-list, Harry Styles' Star Fox, and Sacha Baron Cohen's Mephisto in other projects. Do you want to see them again? Feige asked playfully. Lol. When a reporter asked that the inclusion of these characters indicates a promise that they would return at some point, Feige brought up the return of Tim Blake Nelson's character Samuel Stearns from 2008's The Incredible Hulk to 2025's Captain America Brave New World, and Rolf Saxon's character William Donlow from 96 Mission Impossible for 2020. What? That's a weird example. That's bizarre that he's used that example, but I think it's, like I said, the BS alert is going off. Do you want to see them again? That's funny. Here's the thing. Him using Tim Blake Nelson's character, which only was brought back as a sort of maybe, and it was a reshoot is why he was brought back, because the film needed retooling, and they didn't think that the villain they had hired, which I believe was Seth Rollins, wrestler Seth Rollins, as the lead villain, was good enough for that film. So they searched their archives. They saw Tim Blake Nelson could do this reshoot schedule, and brought him back into. And the plot made a little amount of sense with regards to him being in it. But yeah, I'm. Look, I mean, the examples they give, for example, I don't give a monkeys about Brett Goldstein's Hercules. I don't give a monkeys about Harry Styles' Star Fox. Mephisto I'm on board with, because I think he could be a really interesting foil. And Clea is fine. I like Charlize Theron. So I don't really know what you do with Clea being a permanent fixture. Doesn't need it. But I think he's going to answer that question in a minute anyway. Because I think it's all a moot point. I think it's all a moot point. Yeah, I think, whatever. With regards to the cameos, I mean, they're not cameos. They were put in there for a reason to circle back to. But again, it's systematic of what's been going on in phases 4 and 5. They put these cameos in there for reasons. People to get excited about a Brett Goldstein Hercules not led project, I'd imagine, but like, he's going to feature in, I don't know, Thor 5, or for example, if that happens. But it's a plot strand that went nowhere, promised something and delivered nothing, and then people get bored of it after a couple of years. They go, well, that Hercules thing didn't go anywhere, did it? Nope. Clea come at the end of Multiverse of Madness in 2022. We're now in 2025. Haven't seen her since. So you go, okay, that happened. Okay, we'll move on from that. Mephisto's just debuted in the MCU, so that's still fresh in people's minds. But I think that was filmed 2 years ago, so it's again no plan in place for that. Now that was a different one, because that character is such a force that it could bypass again what I think he's about to go into, which is the reset that he's promising. Clad in a Fantastic Four hoodie and seated next to a giant $80 Galactus popcorn bucket, which I want, by the way, Feige took time to herald the return of Marvel's first family, blah, blah, blah. They deserve to be A-listers. They've been maybe good Fantastic Four movies, or not so good Fantastic Four movies, but nothing that felt like what we'd really seen what they are capable of. I'd agree with that. Feige also teased that the 4 lead actors from the unreleased 94 Fantastic Four film, executive produced by Roger Corman, all have cameos in the new movie. That's pretty cool. He was especially excited about the retro future aesthetic of the Fantastic Four. Yeah, I agree. And how the film embodies the company's efforts to make projects that aren't intimidating to casual Marvel fans. We always were planning, even before that became a talking point, to introduce them in their own world, in which they are the only heroes, Feige said. It's a no homework required movie. It literally is not connected to anything we've made before. One possible hint for where the MCU could go also lies in Hollywood's past. Asked what he's been watching recently, Feige said he started watching classic films every night, mostly from 1930s and 40s, like the noir thriller The Big Clock, say that right, with Ray Milland and Charles Lawton, The Legal Lawyer Man, and the Western Dodge City with Errol Flynn. It's remember what cinema is and what movie going is and what entertaining audiences is, he says. Everything old is new again, by the way. That's another reason I watch those old movies. As for his own future at Marvel, Feige appears to be keeping his options open. Succession is a hot topic at the Disney company, he says, alluding to Iger's ever-impending departure as Disney CEO. We always talk about succession, even within divisions too, I think for that reason. Do I want to be making movies for big audiences in 10 to 15 years? Yes, absolutely. That's all I want to do. Marvel's a great way to do that for me right now, but I hope to make big movies for lots of people forever. End of article. So he didn't actually go into the big story, so I'll do it for him. Marvel plans to recast the X-Men and Tony Stark after Avengers Secret Wars, but a reboot is a scary word, says Feige. The all-new X-Men are coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and an all-new Tony Stark will eventually join them. In a wide-ranging conversation with press on Friday, Marvel Studios chief confirmed that following the events of Secret Wars, the company will recast the superpowered mutants for its upcoming X-Men movie directed by Jake Schreier. Thunderbolts. Great choice. Many of the actors who starred in the X-Men movies of the 2000s and 2010s are reprising their roles in Doomsday for a reason. Patrick Stewart also played Charles Xavier in 2022's Doctor Strange, and Kelsey Grammer appeared as Hank McCoy in a post-credit scene in 2023's The Marvel. Who could forget? Excuse me. In future films, In future films, however, X-Men characters who appeared in previous movies will be played by new actors, along with mutants making their big screen debut. Highlight. The decision echoes changes in the composition of the Marvel Comics following 2015's Secret Wars storyline, which involved multiple timelines collapsing and reconverging, mixing up the characters of the main Marvel timeline in the process. We are utilising that story not just to round out the stories we've been telling you post-Endgame, just as importantly, and you can look at the Secret Wars comics for where that takes you. It very, very much sets us up for the future. Feige said Endgame literally was about endings, Secret Wars is about beginnings. Pause for thought here. We're going to this. But Feige was also careful not to characterise the changes as a reboot. Instead, the executive says Secret Wars will serve as a reset for the MCU. Reboot is a scary word, he said. Reboot can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Reset, singular timeline. We're thinking along those lines later, he added. X-Men is where that will happen next. So I'll pause there. Yes, brilliant idea. I think Secret Wars gives a chance to clean all this stuff we've been talking about over the last, 45, 50 minutes up. All the messiness, all the weird sort of... what's it called? just the weird stuff that's been going on. There's unanswered questions, all the stuff people aren't keen about, characters even that people aren't particularly au fait with or sort of want to see more of. Clean it all up. You have one, dare I say it, sacred timeline going forward. You clean all this mess up from phases 4, 5 and potentially 6, and you have, after Secret Wars, phase 7, brand new start. There's an element of I don't want to lose some people, but you keep the characters you want to keep, and you lose the characters you don't want to keep. Would be the nicest way of putting it. And in doing so, you sort of lose a lot of. You can lose a lot of the baggage without explaining it, because you're like, well, they just got lost in the reset, which I imagine is going to be a reality warp or rewrite of Suits by a particular character. Feige noted that the X-Men comics, with their focus on Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, naturally centered on stories about adolescent characters. They have been a place to tell stories about young people who feel different and who feel each other and who feel like they don't belong. He said that's the universal story of mutants, and that's where we're going. I think recasting them as young up-and-coming actors is a great idea for multiple reasons. One, it's good for the budget, obviously. Two, I think it's good because, I think the time's right to sort of have a reset. For the majority of them, I think Xavier needs to be a name. Magneto needs to be a name. Probably the villain needs to be a name. Maybe Storm should be a name because of the age of which he is. Possibly Wolverine, possibly. Yeah, because he's got to play a 200-year-old man. Other than that, I think everyone else in that cast could be or should be a younger, 25 to 30-year-old actor. Even more intriguingly, Feige also indicated that other Marvel characters will eventually be recast, including its most iconic roles, like Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. He pointed to many other film franchises that have done the same thing multiple times over. Amy Pascal and David Heyman are now searching for a new James Bond. David Corenswet, the new Superman, he was awesome. That will always be the case. Feige acknowledged that stars who've retired their original MCU roles, like Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, put a pin in that one, have made it difficult to imagine anyone else in their character's shoes, but it isn't an impossible task. I think it's hard for anybody to do that when an actor has done such a great role. How are they going to ever replace Sean Connery as James Bond, right? At least two legacy actors may still yet appear in the MCU as well. Asked about his plans for a follow-up to Marvel's 2024 blockbuster Deadpool and Wolverine with Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, Feige in typical fashion made no definitive statements, but also did not close off any possibilities. I think there's more fun to be had with both of those characters. We will see where. Wink. I think with regards to recasting of, specifically Iron Man and Captain America, yes, do it. Absolutely do it. I think so the option would be you bring them back. I think that boat has sailed when it comes to, the fact Robert Downey Jr. is coming back as Doctor Doom for whatever reason. I don't know the story machinations on that. The fact he is means Iron Man's now, his legacy as Iron Man is so secure, and I would say the same about Chris Evans, Captain America as well. To the point where I'm fine with this. I think you park it, you do your Secret Wars, where you give them their, dare I say, final swan song, because they're going to be in it. We know they're in it, so they're going to be in it as sort of dark variations maybe of their characters, and then you get a fresh rebooted one in 2028, 29, maybe. And you go from there. I think it's fine. It's not a problem. I think everyone's contracts come up eventually. I think the focus of Phase 7 is probably going to be on the X-Men. Seemingly they're going to be all in the same film. I think you build out some of the other characters that we are to build out. I think, I'm not saying I want to see a solo Namor project, but I don't not want to see it either, especially if we're going to keep this Fantastic Four around, perhaps, potentially. Then that would be interesting for reasons as comic book fans know. We've got there's so many stories in the comics that they've still to tell with characters like Iron Man and Captain America, Miles Morales, Spider-Man, for example. I hope they keep Yelena around and give her the Black Widow mantle. I think she's won over audiences. I think she's a really popular character portrayal. There's so many, if you like, the rank of characters that they could repopulate with a brand new actor in the role, similar to James Bond. I think if you'd have asked me 5 years ago, I'd have balked at the idea. But I think we're now in a position with dust being where it has settled, or settling. I think now's the time where I think it's acceptable and okay to do this. I think. But that's just my take. Anyway, that's my long-winded deep dive into the Kevin Feige interview, the MCU in general, where we sit. I was going to do a separate video about this, but it sort of blurred into it with the mini rants. So apologies for that, first of all. But thank you for listening as well. Let me know what you think. If you've enjoyed any of the discussion, and not so much discussion, it's me talking into a microphone. But if you've enjoyed any points and you want to discuss it, there is a comment section. I do listen to comments, read comments, respond to comments. So feel free to do that as well. Please leave a like and subscribe on the channel. I want to be doing more MCU stuff going forward because I'm a big fan, as you can probably tell, and I'm very passionate about it. I just don't have the time usually to put the effort into doing it. But Feige talks, and then I sit up and listen. So there we are. This is a long video, so apologies for that again. But thank you very much for watching, listening, and I'll speak to you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.